Welcome to the Three Wise Men of Divorce, Money, Psych, and Law podcast. Sit down with the California divorce experts, financial divorce consultant Mark Hill, psychologist Scott Weiner, and attorney Shawn Weber for a frank and casual conversation about divorce, separation, co-parenting, and the difficult decisions real people like you face during these tough times. We know that if you are looking at divorce or separation, it can be scary and overwhelming. With combined experience of over 70 years in divorce and conflict management, we are here for you and look forward to helping by sharing our unique ideas, thoughts, and perspectives on divorce, separation, and co-parenting. Okay, guys, so it's a pretty wild world out there right now, isn't it?
It's astonishing what's happening right now.
I was just talking to my mother, who is older and convalescing at home, recovering from a stroke a few years ago. And she's like, I can't watch the TV, but I have to watch the TV. But I can't watch the TV. And I don't like what's happening in the world. It's so awful, but I can't not watch it. And I think it's impacting her health a little bit.
What are you seeing in your work?
Well, I've never been this busy in my career. So anecdotally, I have noticed a definite uptick in people needing to get out of their marriage.
I've noticed an uptick in urgency.
Yeah, there's kind of an urgency in the tone when they call. I got to do this now. I got to do it right now. Right now.
Really,
it's got to happen now.
Exactly.
I was struck by a Daily Mail report that's on their website, dailymail.com, that divorce rates in America soar by 34% during the COVID-19 pandemic.
My goodness.
With marriages crumbling 3 weeks into quarantine and newlywed separations doubling to 20%. That's really high if it's true.
Yeah. Now, there may be that, if that's a website that is having people file online, the COVID may have increased there. So it may be a question of sample, but I'm really busy too.
Well, I wouldn't give it a whole lot of credence because they're just kind of quoting this website. Legal templates indicated that divorce rates soared during the first 4 months of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think what Legal Templates is an outfit that files things for people, right, or helps people file for a divorce. And they saw an uptick.
So what have we seen anecdotally in our own practices?
Well, Shawn is ultra busy. You're seeing an uptick. I'm kind of holding level, but the intensities that I'm seeing are greater. People are having a much worse time absorbing the fact that they don't have to fight in quite as vehement a way. I can usually manage to calm people much more readily. It's happening slower now. It's like they're very attached to their positions anybody who works in mediation is always shifting people out of position into a sense of interests and then looking for shared interests, common interests. Mm-hmm. Not so fast right now.
It's hard to find a common interest that they can share. I had a couple on the other day on a Zoom call, and we were just trying to do this thing that I always do where we're identifying what their values are for their family.
The big rocks?
The big rocks, what I call them. How do you fit as much stuff into a container as you can? You start with the big rocks and then you work down to the small rocks. So I start with these no-brainer values, things that should be easy, right? Like, we don't want to talk negatively about each other in front of our children. That's usually a no-brainer. For them, it was not.
Yeah.
And their children were very much, I think because they're all just kind of stuck in this house and their children are very much involved. And there was a scare with the family where one of them thought they had COVID and had some separation. It was very challenging for them, and it was more challenging than I typically see.
I think that we're all, and especially if we're under stress because our relationships are crumbling, I think we're all missing our normal outlets. You can't go out and with your girlfriends for a night. You can't go to the bar with your buddy and have a drink and talk about how awful, your wife is. I think that is a release that people normally have. You can't go and do the things you normally do. And so we're stuck in this situation, and it's 6 months now. So people are really struggling with seeing an end to it. I think people that have taken it seriously, are no more inclined to go out today than they were at the start.
Well, and if you're going to go out, what would you do? So like I've noticed, my office is steps away from the beach. It's kind of nice. I have never seen this beach. This is usually one of those beaches that kind of gets low traffic. I have never seen this beach so crowded. And it's because that's the only thing you can do. You can't go to the movie.
Yeah.
You can go to dinner, but, they make you sit on the patio or you have to order out. My son is taking up skateboarding.
And, I've been talking about trying to get my band together for the first time in 6 months to play, have a practice. We wouldn't do it indoors because there's obviously risks there, but we've talked about setting up on my patio and just playing outside. Technically, in the county we are in, gentlemen, gatherings of more than one person outside, not from the same household, is not allowed. So, and they've opened SeaWorld, but I can't have my band guys over. So, we're all feeling these kind of frustrations, and you add to that crumbling relationships and people who perhaps knew they were going to divorce anyway, but now they're locked up.
And it's not just that. If it was just that, it would be easy or easier.
Yeah. Easier.
But it's the political environment is also making it very stressful for people.
Right. You've noticed this.
I don't care which side of the aisle you're on or how you see things politically. People are ramped up. My Facebook feed is unbelievable. And it's both sides are just going at it. You watch the convention, both sides, it's the end of the world if their candidate doesn't win. Armageddon, apocalyptic dystopia is awaiting us if your candidate doesn't win, is what they're being told. And I'm a political junkie. I have a degree in political science. I think you do too, Mark, right?
I do, yes.
I have never seen politics or studied politics quite like this.
There have been periods like this in the past in our own history here, and also in the United Kingdom when, the battles between Disraeli and Gladstone in the late 1800s were vehement and nasty and personal.
But here's where I'm going to take issue with that. That's true. Like Andrew Jackson, remember his stories with, but it never has been such a unifying, the entire populace is right. Mobilized on sides like this.
Yeah, you're right, because we didn't have the same type of communication.
Within your community, like even during the Civil War, within your community, everybody kind of saw things the same way, and they didn't get so involved in the very personal political disputes that are playing out on the television.
Well, there was more unity geographically within areas, whereas now, it just isn't like that. There's just this huge polarity within each community.
So how does that play into what we do?
Well, I was thinking of the obvious story is the Conway family, Kellyanne Conway and George Conway.
George, yeah.
Bless their hearts, they're public figures, so they get picked on right now. But within their family, there was obviously political tension. And then what happened is their daughter started tweeting with her political view, which was quite left of center. They're both right of center. He is vehemently anti-Trump, and obviously Kellyanne Conway worked for the president. And we had the pleasure or displeasure of seeing this play out on Twitter as their daughter was tweeting and was, quote unquote, officially pushing for emancipation. and he was leading the Lincoln Project, which is a group of anti-Trump Republicans, and she was working for the White House. And now the two parents have quit their jobs so they could be better, so they put their family first, which I think is the right choice. You know, I think your family has to come first. But I wonder to what extent the political tensions wore on that marriage and on that family. I mean, I don't know. They're private. Some of this stuff has been very public. But clearly their daughter is in distress.
Yep. I would say that's a very courageous adjustment they made. I'm impressed. I'm greatly impressed.
Yeah, I mean, I actually applaud them both for making a choice for their family and stepping away from these what could be very lucrative projects for them.
I believe I'm 70 years old. I've been watching politics for a long time. In 1972, 1973, 1974, during Watergate, I was a 22, 23, 24-year-old guy, young guy.
I was 3.
Well, I remember
be quiet, because I was about the same age as the man who's speaking. So we actually have something to say. So be quiet.
Well,
I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to be the whippersnapper listening.
Here's what occurred to me back then. As I was watching this all occur with Nixon, with Watergate, with the incredible turbulence politically at that time, I had this thought. I thought to myself, I'm way too young to be thinking this, but I'm thinking I'll never see anything like this again in my lifetime. And here I am, 70 years young, fairly young for 70, but God damn it, I'm still 70. Excuse me, but I am. And I'm thinking, all right, here we go. This is as turbulent and as outrageous as I have seen American politics in my lifetime. Now, I know as you're reporting, you weren't there either, but Andrew Jackson, and at that time, he was considered a rake hell.
Well, Mark, I think, was there for Andrew Jackson.
No. Not quite. Let me help with a slightly younger perspective than Mr. Weiner's here. Being a young fellow of only 69, I was actually engaged around that time too. And it was, we were in England not involved in the war, but we adopted the campaign and the cause just in the same degree that to the anti-war people did here. And it caused great strife within my family. My father was a military man. And,
mine too.
Short back and sides. And we grew our hair and we, did things that he thought were inappropriate.
I had fist fights with my dad.
I ended up with a battle with my father where he was threatening to throw my stereo out of an upstairs bedroom window.
That's serious.
As I stood across with an axe, which I'd grabbed from the woodshed across the head of his Jaguar, that I said, go ahead and drop it. That's what it came to. That was the worst of our fights. And after that, there were no more. But that's
how so upset.
Intense it was in that time. And I agree with you. It's worse today because there is no agreement about basic facts.
Right. That's
different. That's the challenging thing. It's like the old saying, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Aren't there just objective facts out there?
Nope, not anymore.
Wait a minute.
Depends on which.
But we don't agree on them.
It depends on which news outlet you're looking at.
Yes, I know, but it does not. I mean, his point, it does not depend on that.
It shouldn't.
It shouldn't.
No, it can't.
It shouldn't. And there is a basic
it doesn't.
reality out there, but it
That's my point.
It doesn't come through because there's also this thing that's happening that's fuller polarizing society. And it's this concept of confirmation bias, where you will only be attracted to those headlines that confirm your bias, that agree with you.
Right. And
it's just kind of a natural inclination. I kind of force myself to read headlines that I find outrageous because I want to see what is the thinking that led to this headline that for me doesn't compute.
I do that also.
And
I
I'll read it, and it's painful to do that. But
Yep.
But, if you allow yourself to just be in your own bubble of the people that agree with you, I go to Real Clear Politics a lot, and I find myself, the realclearpolitics.com, they list all these different articles from different points of view, and there'll be one article that says pro this and one that says anti that. And the temptation really is to only click on the things that you agree with, just from the headline.
And that
I feel that
bias is increased by social media, where
Correct.
you're literally fed it's like a feedback loop, where the more you click on something like that, the more you get to see. And that is further isolating and creates more extremism.
Well, and then what's happening is our young people are struggling. And so there's another, the CDC just released a report this month that young people have increased. They have a study where young people have increased the experience of suicidal thoughts that they're having during the pandemic. According to the report, 10.7% of the more than 5,000 people surveyed seriously considered suicide in the past 30 days.
Of adolescents?
That was in June of 2020.
Age
and
group?
Then that number is even higher for people ages 18 to 24, with 25% of all people in that age range saying that they had seriously considered suicide.
And as you reported to me when I was sitting on the floor in your office, all the psychologists said, well, what do you mean seriously considered?
Right.
Which is, of course, what I'm saying too.
Well, they probably clicked a box on the survey that said, yeah, I seriously considered it. And so Scott and I were kind of debating, well, what does seriously consider mean? Does that mean that you mapped it out in your head?
How about documented suicide attempts?
To address this in a way, I think that when basically we're doing a safety analysis as a clinician, we're wondering if there's intent. You go from having attempted back to having seriously thought about attempting, which is to say have a plan and a really detailed plan plus the opportunity. So if you have a plan and you also do have the pills, or you do have the blade, or you do have the weapon, or whatever it is, that's another level of proximity to an act. And going back to ideation or having thought about it, and then in more general terms, to be or not to be, that is the question, is sort of a fairly universal human, capacity. But right now, I mean, when you report that data to me, it's like, I find that so not shocking, given what else, the intensity of how everything feels right now, that it's just so unpleasant.
Listen,
and
to
not
this.
just unpleasant, it's threatening.
In that age group of 18 to 24, 49.1% of them expressed suffering from anxiety disorder. 52.3% claim to have depressive disorder. 62.9% of them say they have anxiety or a depressive disorder.
Hmm.
And 46% of them blame COVID for it.
And I wonder what percentage of people in that age group are either less or not employed at all relative to how it was before.
And that's what I was going to ask. How much is money a factor in this?
Well, it's not just money, Mark. It's security. It's like a
self-worth too.
Continuity of life. It's like,
Yeah.
Right at 18 to 24, when you're typically just getting your feet on the ground and kind of going, okay, well,
Well, this is interesting. I'm looking at these stats on the CDC website here.
Yep.
And it says 30.1% of the employed claim to have anxiety disorder. 32.0% of the unemployed claim to have anxiety disorder. So they're
that means one of the three of us on this call must have anxiety disorder statistically, doesn't it?
No, I'm very anxious about whether I have anxiety disorder.
Do any of us have a real job?
Whippersnapper. So.
Do any of us have a real job? I'm not sure.
Well, this is fascinating. I mean, education, the less educated have higher rates of problems emotionally.
That makes sense to me.
The more educated are doing better. People with a professional degree are doing better. I think that's because they're more secure in their work. That's my guess.
Yeah, I would say so. It's become a binary employment market out there.
But it's a fascinating study if people want to look at it. But I think it's clear the CDC has found that, at least based on this sample of people surveyed, 5,000 plus people, that there's some struggles.
So how can we help families at this time? I mean, people are locked up still with their spouses. If divorce is on the table, what can we do?
Well, I think don't add to your stress. And I think that's easy to do when you're in the middle of a divorce and you're feeling pain, or maybe you are considering suicide, or maybe you do have major, anxiety problems or depression. Don't do things to cause more stress for you.
Well, but that's why I'm not getting a divorce, because that would cause more stress. But it's awful in the house and I don't know what to do.
Well, maybe not getting divorced is causing you more stress too. So, I mean, maybe you need to get a divorce, but the question I have to ask people is, well, then how are you going to do that? Are you going to do it in a way that's going to make it worse, or are you going to do it in a way that's going to make it not worse?
To be fair, I mean, to anybody who's listening to this, we, of course, the three of us share a tremendously correct bias, shall I say. Excuse me. In that we discussed, I believe, 2 weeks ago, how to make it as bad as possible.
Yeah, we did.
We did. We talked about how to
have a miserable divorce.
The most miserable, least productive, most expensive, and most likely to produce a future of hell and repetition.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we expand this question, not even just for those who are getting divorced, but all of us who are practically worldwide suffering with this thing, if we could do something to augment our patience, if we could do something to kind of stand back, take a breath, get through, in a way, narrow the focus to living good days. I mean, even being polite to the other person at the gas station behind his or her mask. Little things, which actually, when we're mediating, we're doing that all the time. Small behaviors, small positive behaviors, or at least we try to diminish the negatives as best as possible. I'm doing a mediation right now with a couple that's been divorced for 12 years and trying to help them work out, some of their step situations. And there is a level of intensity and of negativity going on that is practically shocking to me. And I try to exert as little extra control and authority as possible, right? To let these people, flush out their own ideas, this, that, and the other. I am being a tyrant. I am being a tyrant now to get them to stop doing harm. I mean, you guys know me. I'm being more obnoxious even than usual.
Oh man, that must be bad.
I know that it's hard on me. But
well, okay. So I mean, what are you trying to get them to do? What are you trying to get them to avoid doing? I guess I should say.
All right. In this particular instance, what's happening is that in the course of airing sincere disagreements, they are unearthing every data point of history of negativity. That it's almost like I hate you, free association kind of thing.
Yeah. Boy, am I familiar with that.
Oh yeah, we've all seen that, and it's. And we're doing this remotely, right? So it's a mixture of Zooming and this terrible tirade of texts that are going on. And I'm going, okay, here's what you're going to do. You're going to stop this. You're going to do.
Well, I've gotten to the point where I don't even want to hear the history. I'm like, stop. We're not going
Yeah.
to talk about what the past is. We're going to talk about where we are now and where we need to go.
Sure. But they're using these things as proof that the other person's current point is like,
That
that's my
happens.
point.
That happens, but I've learned to say, I'm not the judge here.
Right.
You know what? I'm not allowed to have a favorite here. You're not going to convince me to assist your position and sort of underwrite. I may agree with you 100%. I may agree with your spouse 100%. Hopefully you can't tell, because that's my role.
When these folks get on a roll, I am about as significant as a gnat on the aft side of a gigantic beast of some kind. They couldn't care less that I exist. They have their own momentum, and oh my God, it's like,
well, it shows you just how much stress they're under.
Yes.
And that's why people do this. I mean, they're unhappy. They're experiencing trauma. Right?
Yes.
Well, and that's where I come back to my kind of hypothesis is the way to help people get through that is to help them short circuit the trauma, or at least not make the trauma more traumatic. Like money issues, Mark. There are things that people can do that will certainly make them more traumatized with their money.
Yeah. And at a time when some couples are really struggling for income.
I've really enjoyed watching you just kind of like, okay, let's just relax and let's talk about what we need to do. Let's not make any major changes right now.
Yeah.
Let's figure out what we need to do.
Well, the first thing is, it's so often you can see somebody catastrophizing something. Okay?
Yeah.
And we've got a catastrophic environment that we operate in the larger world in the same way as we've described earlier in this call, but if you think about it, let's really look at the numbers. Let's sit down and see, first of all, does everybody have a roof over their head, and are the bills getting paid? Okay, then we may not have anything terribly urgent to address. You've got things that are critical you want to make sure are addressed in the divorce process. Put a pin in it, as Weber says.
Yeah, but we have first world problems here.
We will guarantee you we will talk about it. Can't guarantee you outcome. I don't know. You won't get everything you want. Nobody ever does. But I guarantee you'll get your day to talk about it, and we'll have a discussion. If you can tell people that, and that can bring the valence down to the point where they go, oh, okay, yeah, I do have a roof over my head. The bills are getting paid. Okay, I can be a little more practical as opposed to terrified and catastrophizing every little spending or event that occurs around the money.
So, I think there's nothing more terrorizing about money than not knowing stuff.
Yes.
It's on both sides. It could be, I'm afraid this person's going to steal my business from me that I worked my whole life to build. That could be one piece of terror. Yeah. Another piece of terror could be, oh my gosh, this person has controlled the finances throughout the marriage, and I'm afraid I'm going to be taken advantage of.
Right.
So what do you say to those people?
Well, I say that's why you hire a neutral. That's why you hire somebody, one person who can gather all the financial data, make sure that everything is disclosed properly, and make sure the forms that get to be signed under penalty of perjury for the court are done correctly. And then hopefully, if you're the uneducated person, you have the opportunity to learn and to become up to speed so you can be a participant in your own divorce as opposed to a passenger on the train going down a track faster than you'd like it to. I think that if you can have that kind of situation, you will end up, as I say, bringing the valence down. You get to learn about it. Most people, even if they have not been engaged in the money, even if their idea of the money it scares them to approach it, I think that if you walk through it step by step, it's not that complicated. You got assets and you got debts, you got expenses and you've got income. Let's quantify it.
But he's hidden away so much money in the Cayman Islands, or there's all these terrors that people express.
Yeah, and you know what? If we start to see the Cayman Islands, maybe it's not a collaborative case. You know?
Well, and here's the other thing is once we shine a flashlight on it, what I've noticed with people is they're less afraid, even if it's bad news.
Yes.
That's true too.
Yep. And by the way, there are legitimate reasons for having accounts in the Cayman Islands.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
I used to hate spelunking when I was a kid, caving, and I'd go into a cave and I hate it. I just hate it because you can't see farther than where the flashlight. And one time I was in there and my flashlight went out and I was fumbling for just a moment to find the spare batteries and all that stuff. And, there's that moment you have the rational thought to know I am going to be okay. But when you can't see, it's terrifying. Yeah. And I think that's how a lot of our clients feel going into this. I don't know what's going to happen on the other end as I go through this tunnel. It's terrifying to me. And so the best thing we can do for folks is to shine a flashlight.
Yes, because I think back to many, many years ago when I had an antique business in England and I was failing financially. I kept working harder and I wouldn't look at the numbers because it was so terrifying. I knew that it just wasn't going to work. And eventually my dad kind of verbally slapped me around, told me to go do it. And I did it. And yeah, it was bad, but it wasn't as bad as I imagined.
It feels better when you see it, when you see the actual facts, doesn't it?
You have the opportunity now to make a plan to correct it.
Well, and go ahead.
No, I was going to say, even then it took a military man.
Absolutely. Oh, I learned a lot from him, though we did fight.
Good for you. Good for you. And I from mine too.
Well, and I from mine.
We reconciled before
we
his
did.
end.
Absolutely too. It was that battle that we had with the car and the thing was the last big fight we ever had.
Really?
Yeah.
Before mine went his final way, he told me that, I can see now that you kids were right about that stuff.
My dad said to me after we had that battle, that same day, I really respect the way you stood up to me. I go, I was terrified. You're a British Army middleweight boxing champion. And
oh my goodness.
He was a.
Well, I love that famous Mark Twain quote. When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to be 21, I was astonished at how much the old man had learned in 7 years.
Yeah, exactly. Ain't that true? Yeah.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with my father. I'm assuming my son is going to eventually realize that I'm not a moron.
My son did, and we didn't even have to come to blows because he was such a good kid.
Actually, my kid's really good.
But he did say, "Oh, Dad, you're kind of my hero." When he was like 25, my response was, "Who are you, and what have you done with my son?"
Your response through tears, probably, right?
No, it was genuine concern that he'd been replaced by aliens.
And so, guys, it's interesting that we kind of drifted to this subject, but family is really, it's the core of who people are, right? Yeah. And so I always tell people, before you consider getting the divorce, take out a piece of paper, take out a notebook, and write down all the things that really, really matter to you. What do those high level values that I was talking about?
Yep.
And then that becomes a decision-making algorithm for you.
Yes.
So you're not going to make any decisions that are going to be conflicting with those values. So if making sure your son is okay or your daughter is okay is high on your list, you're going to make sure that the decisions you make in the divorce are going to make sure that child is okay.
And more than that, you should think about the way you conduct yourself through that prism. I always say, and I'll repeat it, think about the story your children are going to tell about their parents' divorce. What do you want that story to be?
But what do you do about folks that say, well, I know what story I want to tell. I want it to be a nice story, but the other person isn't cooperating with creating this story.
Right. But do you think they might want to tell a good story too?
Bingo.
Yeah.
From their
one
perspective.
Of the things that a plug for the collaborative model in which we engage is that at the beginning of the collaborative process, we do engage people in the discussion of the mission of this whole project. Mm-hmm. Not to be too long-winded on it. I mean, the coaches typically do it, quietly and rapidly with the people, but we work on that story. And then later on in the process, when things get either heated or conflictual, we will often revert to that and say, hey, wait a minute. Don't you remember how you wanted this to be?
Right.
Let's go back there. Let's go back there. It's not a long backtrack. You were there a week ago. Let's get back into that. You have any interest you have. Typically, the other side has that interest too, really, if it's a truthful interest, as opposed to if it's, well, I have an interest in bashing the hell out of this SOB, Well, not if you want to tell a decent story, not if you want to be together at your children's wedding someday.
Yeah.
And that's why, I always say we come back to the present. Let's be present when we're having these discussions about your divorce, not playing the ticker tape of all the things that the jerk did wrong. But can we be present and bring our best self to the negotiation so that we can tell this good story instead of spinning into a place of despair and anxiety and trauma?
And what resources do you need at the table in order to be able to bring that best self?
Yeah, and be willing to put the work in and frankly, the money in to be able to pay for those resources so that you can do the right thing by your family.
Yeah.
In the case I was discussing earlier, there is such a deep loyalty to listing all of the past historical errors of the other people.
I love that loyalty.
Oh,
it's loyalty to the past story. Yeah.
It is exactly the right word in this particular set of circumstances. Yes, it's almost it's a litany. It's like a pledge. It's like I
end up singing Disney songs to people like that. Let it go, let it go.
Yeah.
My.
Easy for me to say. I mean, people really are struggling. People are disappointed in what happened to their dream. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Just don't lose sight of that possibility. Just think about what's possible and you can get there, I think.
I think it was Bare Naked Ladies who had the song.
One of my favorites.
There you go. It won't mean a thing in 100 years.
Yeah.
It's a song about a guy who girl turns him down or, something happens in his family. It's like, it won't mean a thing in 100 years. And ain't that the truth? Don't sweat. There's another thing, isn't it? Don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff. Now, divorce is not small stuff, but don't let the small stuff interfere with what's important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, guys, I think that's all we can say.
That is about it for today, I think.
I'm out.
Well, you know what? If people wanted to call me and get their dispute resolved, they go to WeberDisputeResolution.com.
And if they want to get a hold of me, that's Weber with one B, like the grill.
Like the grill. And
if they want to get a hold of me, Mark Hill, Pacific Divorce Management is my company. PAC Divorce, PACDIVORCE.com is the way to reach me.
And if they want to get in contact with Scott Weiner to resolve a dispute or to really engage in the beginnings of a collaborative process for divorce, they would call Scott Weiner, Weiner. I am a psychologist, PhD, and I am inactive in the bar, but I'm law trained as well. And I answer my own telephone at 619-417-5743.
All right, guys. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm going to go home and hug my family.
Me
Go
too.
hug 'em.
Me too. I might also eat some good food, but I'm not going to my favorite restaurant.
No.
Yeah.
No.
But we're not going to sweat that because that's the small stuff.
There you go.
I'm just glad you're eating, Scott.
Yeah, I know. I'm so wasting away. Did you notice that?
I was worried about you.
Oh, my wife.
I am expanding, ever expanding.
I thought he was on the floor because he was weak from hunger.
That's what it was. Yeah. I told him if he's a good boy, I'll give him some scraps from my table.
Oh, my goodness.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Three Wise Men of Divorce: Money, Psych, and Law. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share with others who may be in a similar place. Until next time, stay safe, healthy, and focused on a positive, bright future. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Every family law case is unique, so no legal, financial, or mental health advice is intended during this podcast. If you need help with your specific situation, feel free to schedule a time to speak with one of us for a personal consultation.